London, August 23, 1305. Thousands are flooding the streets. Families, merchants, children on their fathers' shoulders. Street vendors hawk meat pies and ale, profiting off what's about to unfold. These people aren't here for a festival. They're here to watch a man be torn apart. Before we dive into one of history's most brutal executions, hit that like button and subscribe. What you're about to hear is raw, unfiltered history, the kind they don't teach in schools. Let's get into it. His name is William Wallace. To England, he's a traitor. To Scotland, he's a warrior, a leader, a living symbol of resistance. What's about to happen isn't just an execution. It's a performance written in agony and blood, designed to terrify anyone who might dare follow in his footsteps. Medieval Scotland in the 1290s was chaos. When King Alexander III died in 1286 with no clear heir, the kingdom fractured. Across the border, King Edward I of England, Longshanks, standing over 6 feet tall, saw his opportunity. He'd already conquered Wales. Now he wanted Scotland. Edward marched north with his armies, installing puppet rulers and demanding Scottish nobles swear loyalty. Most bent the knee, but not William Wallace. Wallace wasn't nobility. He was the son of a minor knight who grew up understanding hardship. When English soldiers committed atrocities against his family, murdering loved ones, something fierce awakened inside him. Some people break under tragedy. Wallace caught fire. In 1297, he gathered common Scots, farmers, laborers, and began attacking English positions. Then came the Battle of Stirling Bridge in September 1297. An English army with superior numbers and equipment marched north to crush Wallace's rebellion. Wallace positioned his forces brilliantly, letting the English cross a narrow bridge over the River Forth. When half had crossed, he attacked. The bridge became a death trap. Scottish spearmen cut down English knights. The English suffered one of their most humiliating defeats. Wallace had proven the English could be beaten. He was made guardian of Scotland. Songs were sung about him. He became more than a man, he became a symbol. But Edward never forgot Stirling Bridge. The next year, he led a massive army into Scotland. At the Battle of Falkirk, Wallace's forces were crushed. But Wallace didn't give up. For 7 years, he continued fighting, leading guerrilla raids, constantly hunted but never captured, until betrayal found him. In August 1305, a Scottish knight named Sir John Menteith lured Wallace into a trap. English soldiers surrounded him. Edward finally had his prize. Wallace's journey to London took weeks of deliberate humiliation. He was paraded through English towns like a captured animal, bound and filthy, displayed so crowds could jeer. English propaganda had painted him as a monster, but Wallace never broke. Witnesses said he looked people directly in the eyes with a gaze that seemed to burn through them. The English wanted to see him weep. He gave them nothing but defiance. At Westminster Hall, he faced what they called a trial. He was charged with treason, murder, robbery. Wallace made one final statement. He could not be a traitor to Edward because he'd never sworn loyalty to him. How could he betray an oath he'd never taken? The judges didn't care. They sentenced him to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. Let me explain exactly what this meant. First, Wallace would be tied to a wooden hurdle and dragged through London's streets by horses, his body scraping across cobblestones, tearing his flesh. Second, he'd be hanged by the neck, but not until death, just long enough to suffocate him to the edge of unconsciousness. Third, while still breathing and conscious, he'd be cut down and laid on a table. An executioner would slice open his abdomen and pull out his intestines and organs while he watched. These would be burned before his eyes. Fourth, only after this agony would he finally be beheaded. But even then, it wasn't over. His corpse would be quartered, cut into 4 pieces, and sent to different locations across Scotland. His head would be preserved in tar and mounted on London Bridge for years. This wasn't punishment. This was creating a spectacle of suffering so extreme that anyone who witnessed it would think 100 times before defying English rule. August 23rd arrived. London prepared like it was hosting a festival. Thousands flooded Smithfield. Wealthy spectators paid for better viewing positions. Street vendors sold food and drink. This was entertainment. Wallace was stripped nearly naked, tied to the hurdle, and dragged through London's busiest streets. Every cobblestone tore at his skin. Blood smeared the streets. The crowd jeered, threw garbage and stones. But Wallace's eyes remained fierce, burning with defiance that wouldn't die. At Smithfield, 10,000 people or more packed in. The executioner waited with his tools. The noose, sharpened knives, and a roaring fire. They placed the noose around Wallace's neck and dropped him. Not far enough to break his neck, but just enough to slowly strangle him. His body convulsed violently, fighting desperately for air. Just before he lost consciousness, they cut the rope. Then the true horror began. The executioner made an incision in Wallace's abdomen and began pulling out his intestines. Imagine being conscious as your own organs are removed. The executioner was skilled. He knew how to prolong the agony without causing immediate death. One by one, Wallace's organs were removed, held high for the crowd, then thrown into the fire. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. Some in the crowd turned away. Some vomited. Many cheered. Through all of this, Wallace remained partially conscious. His eyes were open, but he never begged, never pleaded, never gave them the satisfaction of seeing him break. Finally, the executioner signaled for the axe. One clean stroke severed Wallace's head. The crowd erupted in cheers. Then came the quartering. Wallace's limbs were methodically severed: right arm, right leg, left leg. His head was dipped in hot tar and mounted on London Bridge, where it stayed for years. The 4 quarters were sent to Newcastle, Berwick, Stirling, and Perth, each a message of English power. Edward thought he was killing a man and ending a rebellion. What he actually did was create a martyr and ignite a revolution. Wallace's execution didn't silence Scotland. It created a rallying cry. Every Scot who heard what happened had to choose: accept submission or choose resistance. Most chose rage. Within years, Robert the Bruce rose up with renewed determination. In 1314, at Bannockburn, Scottish forces won a crushing victory, securing independence. Throughout his campaign, Wallace's name was invoked constantly. Edward died in 1307, still obsessed with conquering Scotland, believing he could hammer the Scots into submission. He failed catastrophically. Centuries later, Wallace remains one of Scotland's greatest heroes. Monuments tower in his honor. His story reached global audiences through Braveheart. But the real monument isn't made of stone. It's made of every person who heard his story and decided some things are worth standing up for, no matter the cost. William Wallace was torn apart in the most brutal execution medieval England could devise. But in his death, Scotland found renewed life. The execution designed to end resistance became the spark that ensured resistance would succeed. That's the real horror. Edward believed he could control through fear. He was utterly wrong. Killing Wallace made him far more powerful than he ever was in life. A living person can be captured and silenced, but a martyr a symbol that cannot be killed. Wallace died in unimaginable agony, his body scattered, his head mounted as a warning. But he was reborn in every generation that followed, in every person who chose resistance over submission, in every moment when someone said no to tyranny. Before we end, hit that like button if the story moved you. Subscribe because we're building something special here, real history, unfiltered. Drop a comment with your thoughts. Until next time, remember, history isn't just dates in a textbook. It's real people who lived, suffered, and fought. People like William Wallace, whose execution was designed to make him a cautionary tale but instead made him eternal. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.